today. My presentation will be a bit difficult. I'm very much used to giving highly technical presentations. However, today we we will be moving away from technical matter, and today we will be talking about employability, so to speak. And therefore, I have taken on the challenge of telling you about what is it like to work in this field, how we can embark in this profession, and then move along. So my presentation is about how to turn your hobby into your job. Before I start my presentation, I want to share a warning with you. Okay, and this is my manifest. This is what I only want to do. I just don't want to give any lectures. I just want to share my trajectory with you. I only want to share my story with you, as I say. I only want you to reflect upon it, to see whether you want to make your hobby a job and how to achieve it. I only want you to have a good time, and I only would like you to make of your talent, which is a trendy word, to make of your talents, as I say, your best ally. So my presentation will be divided in several sections. I will start talking about hobby. So you are all here because you started into here because this was your hobby. You have not been working in it since the beginning. You are all here because you had that incentive of security inside, because breaking security is better fun than breaking a pane of glass, isn't it? However, there are people who also have a good time in defending security. Later on, I'll move on to talk about training. Do we need training, actual training? What type of training? Do we have to go to university to get an education? And well, that also could be debated. And then how to get your first job. I had very many jobs before I finished up in the world of security. And as well, despite this being a hobby for very, very many years, but it also requires significant effort. And then there's those great crazy years, because security is booming. So if you like it, if it is your hobby, that is like you will be even better. So everything has a start, okay? We all have to be very clear about the moment when we start liking it, okay? That you may be 3 years old, 7 years old, 20 years old, but there will come a time that you know for sure that you are so excited about it, that you love it. And I realized that when I was 3 years old. So have you seen this device before? Have you seen this equipment before? Well, not all of you are of a young age, okay? Some of you are of my same age, okay? And you have seen this before, or actually it rings a bell to you. On the screen it says 1985. Well, actually, back in 1985, I was not even born, okay? I was born in 1986. So when I was 3 years old, we had this device at home. I have an elder brother, he's 10 years older, and he got a computer as a present, and he chose this equipment. And then my mother used to tell him off, and he just said, don't let your little brother use the computer because he will break it. And well, because computers at the time were extremely expensive. That was 28 years ago, and I continue to remember it. And then my elder brother used to answer to my mother, look, I let him using it because he can use it better than myself. And actually, he was just showing me what to do, and I used to repeat and to follow everything he was teaching me. I remember I was 3 years old, and then I continued to use the computer over and over again. And I used to use the computer to play games. Well, you may remember games such as these ones, okay? We used to spend hours and hours on end playing this game. This was the game of Emilio Butragueño. I don't know whether you remember it or not, and you could play the same game over and over again. There were no different teams, only two teams, okay? Butragueño was leading or was playing in the white team. Okay, then we also have the Fernando Martin game. And these were the games. Notice, okay, take a look. Well, alarming speed. Okay. And that was it. Okay. That was scoring a goal, and that was our FIFA at that time. I spent hours playing that game. 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. And well, this was what followed. Then a few years later, we had the first Pentium at home. Pentium 2, 266 megahertz, 4 gigabytes hard drive. Actually, we only used 2 during the life cycle of the computer. I will tell you why. And then 64 megabytes RAM. At this point in time, we are talking 16 gigabytes RAM memory for a home computer. And that was the top edge or top computer at the time. And why do we use that? We use like 2 real gigabytes. Actually, the hard drive had 4 gigabytes, but I didn't have enough knowledge. At that time, I was 11 or 12 years old, and I didn't have good enough knowledge. And for many years, we were used only 2 real gigabytes because it was partitioned. And then even though the seller told us that it had like 4 gigabytes hard drive, and you looked for the other 2 additional ones and you couldn't find them. And then at the time I started to read magazines, and they were talking about partitioning the hard drive, or tools that you could do. So the famous F-disk that everyone is aware of now. And when I was 12 years old, I learned about it in a magazine. And then I learned about it, and actually I created a second partition. And I said, well, I've just doubled the capacity of the hard drive. And to me it was a big achievement. And as I said, because for a long time I suffered because I could only use 2 gigabytes where my father had bought me a 4 gigabyte computer. And then a year later, I got to know the internet. That was my second love in life. I fell in love with it. At the time, there were no routers, only a modem to log on to the internet, and the modem gave you the public IP address. Nowadays, you all know that, well, a router creates a private network. You go into the internet through the private address of the router, but there is better security, better protection behind that. But at the time, it was interesting from the offensive viewpoint, because each machine you connected to the modem was right away connected to the internet. So there was no router. So from the viewpoint of offensive viewpoint, that was quite interesting. Then, as I say, the internet arrived, and okay, I'll play the sounds, okay, flat rate from 6 p.m. till 8 a.m. And sometimes the line was disconnected. Do you remember? Well, I used to put clothes on top of the modem because I didn't want to hear that noise or anymore, and I didn't want my parents to know that I was logging the internet in the middle of the night. Okay, it was 2856K, and when the connection went down, it went down. So when you just got the telephone, okay, got a phone call. What happened? That the line was disconnected, and I used to tell my mom, do not take any calls, do not get any calls. Okay, so, well, that was a different time, and anyway, we learned over time. So the internet came home when I was, well, at the end of 2000, and then I started to get curious about security, hacking, and then I started to visit websites. So it was controversial website for cracks. Well, cracks were programs that were replacing the original binary of a program with the objective of cracking down the protection. And, well, that website offered significant wealth of information about how many things worked. It was not only about cracking. I never did any cracking. Well, what do you expect me to tell you? But anyway, there were very many tutorials there, and there weren't very many other websites offering this type of tutorials. At the time, we also had this type of websites. Notice we have recovered them thanks to archive.org that stores a copy since 1999. So these have Hack for Crack websites. So this is very old. It's back, but it is started a long time ago. We are talking about 2002. These were magazines about hacking techniques, and sometimes it was hard to find this type of information, whereas nowadays this type of information is at the tip of at a click away. And then, well, at that time we learned from these type of websites. And then, as I said, I also started to get curious about, well, playing around with all this, okay? There were a group of us who used to get together at high school, and we used to play around with this type of thing. NetBus, have you heard this? Does it ring a bell to you? Well, only a few people. I thought that most of you were going to raise your hands. This was a Trojan. It came out before Google. It was invented before Google. Google came after it. With this Trojan, with this program, you could gain remote control of a device. It was not a reverse Trojan, it was a direct one. As I say, you log on to the internet through your modem IP public key, and that was it. And then you just log on to any port, in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this application, the underlying side of it was very simple. The orders were sent out through TCP. They were sent in plain text, like no protocol, no nothing. So NetBus 1.6. And as I say, you could remotely control the equipment. So we used to open the CD-ROM. Have you heard of Pickwock? Pickwock came out at the same time that NetBus, and we also used to try it out in local networks. And this implemented the vulnerability that Microsoft had, that is to say shared resources, like NSBs rather than shared resources nowadays. And Pickwock implemented a vulnerability from the year 2000. So without knowing the key of the shared resources, it allowed you to accessing it. It was full bypass. You didn't know the password of the shared resource, but it implemented vulnerability. Well, the continues to be a public key that you can use if you so wish. And to me, that was like magic. I pressed this button, I insert the resource, and then this is magic. And at that time, I didn't mind what happened, what was underlying that, because I was 14 years old. And then over time, I started to get an interest in what this application was doing in the background. So, nukes. Have you heard of them? Have you tried them? So this is type of nuke, this is another type of nuke. So we were just using them between us to bother each other. So they implemented denial of attack, denial of access attacks, and they were just bothering each other. So one single tool, one single person with this program could just prevent you from stopping you from logging the internet. What else? I was also curious about information, accessing information, and we used to work on this with IRC through IRC. This is much better known now, so we could use several channels to access this information. And this is an old friend. I spent long hours with it. Messenger. Well, many people nowadays are using Facebook Messenger. And this makes me feel old, even though I'm not old. The original Messenger is the Messenger of Microsoft. Do you remember all that buzzing that you got in the original Messenger? But Messenger allowed us to communicate with each other and also to testing. Can you remember what you could do with 1863 port from Messenger? Well, nowadays that port is used for different purposes. But at that time, when we were messaging each other through messengers, messages went through Microsoft unless you wanted to send out a file. And then at that time, the communication between your machine and the machine of the other person used to be open. So therefore, we were connecting through a public IP address. So if you sent out a file to a friend, you could easily know or get to know his IP public address. And many people use that to send Trojans right away because as it went through Messenger, it was not detected, and then the person ran the Trojans, and because the communication was point to point, okay, then they knew the IP address they need to log into to send in the Trojan. And quite a significant number of people did that because it was quite simple thing to do. This was a basic case. And once we were playing around with it, well, with a group of friends, and then, well, at that time, what we were doing was quite advanced, okay, even though today is very basic, simple thing. And then in this search to find out what was really exciting to me, then I started to get an interest in hacking, okay, without bothering anyone, without breaching the law. And then I started to read. At that time, Kevin Mitnick was very popular. Have you heard of him? Well, at that time, Kevin Mitnick became a reference to me. He was not an exploiter. He was probably the best social engineer of history. And over time, I was lucky enough to meet him and to spend time with him. Okay, he's right in the middle. Well, on the right we have Tema, and then me on the left. I was very lucky to meet him, and as I said, to spend a few days with him. We also have other references, and not all of them are older in age. Okay, so Aaron Swartz, who unfortunately passed away, and he's a reference to many of us because when he was 14 years old, he specified RSS, and he helped in the design of Creative Commons license. He was a brilliant person, and well, his end was unfortunate. And this person was very influential. And he was very influential since the age of 13 up until he died. And he's a very, very interesting person. And then another person who was a great reference to me was Steve Wozniak, other than because of his technical side, which was brilliant. Wozniak was kind of the technical side, and in the work that he did with Steve Jobs. When they produced the first Apple prototype, Steve Jobs was clear that he wanted to set up a company. And then Wozniak said, I work for HP, and the first thing that I have to do is to deliver this to HP, because I learned all this from HP, and this is what helped me produce what I produced. And then he gave that out to HP, and HP was wrong and said, no, the future is not in computer. Okay, and when he got this answer, he became free to do whatever he wanted to do. And he could have decided not to share that with HP, but he decided to do it because he had that value. All right. So when you have a hobby, how can you turn your hobby into your job? Okay, you can do that through training. Well, in this world, training and learning has gone through self-teaching most of the time. So often we are self-taught people. So you will be all the time testing things, reading out, learning from others. Definition of a self-taught people is a person who learns everything by himself. But it is not only that, okay? We cannot learn it all by ourselves. We need help. We need help from books, from literature, from blogs, from labs. Labs are important. When I teach at university, I always tell my students that it's very good that I share with them how I do things, but at the end of the day, we need them to try things out by themselves. I cannot really tell you what SQL injection is unless you do it, you try it out by yourself, you do it and you internalize it. Nowadays, we also have labs in the internet. There are very many sites where we have, we can embark on environments and challenges. We also have the opportunity to use videos and also to use communities to share knowledge. And then university. I went to university. When I went to university, I cannot stop hacking. Then I went to university. I focused on something and other things, such as partying, this kind of thing. So can we say that university is decisive to go into security world? No, not really. Not really. It is not essential. But university will give you basic tools, fundamental tools that will allow you to deepen your knowledge and then to get any job related to IT. Many people say, I'm studying vocational training. Well, no problem. Yes, you can enter the security sector if you do vocational training. You don't need to go to university. And actually, I know cases of people who didn't go to university, didn't do any vocational training, and actually a friend of mine was kind of kicked out from vocational training, and nowadays he's working in the world of security. He's making a good living out of it. He has worked in several companies, and he doesn't have any degrees or any diplomas. So that is to say, different ways to get to the same point. University kind of makes it easier, a bit easier for us for everything that we get out of university. You don't get a full knowledge from university. When you graduate from university, you cannot feel that you are master, but no, university gives us many things.
Acceder cualquier tipo de perfil.
Any type of profile can access that. You don't need a university degree to get there, and it's specialization. You have to constantly recycle yourself. This job changes every day. I remember a friend of mine back in university, and I appreciate this person just in case he's listening, and he used to say, well, I want to finish this degree in order to stop studying. And there was some short circuit or overflow in my head, because our industry, the technology industry, changes every day. If you don't keep yourself updated, you're going to stay behind. And cybersecurity world goes even beyond IT in this sense. You need to recycle yourself all the time. Private training, well, this is another option. It's there's a market in order to continue to recycle yourself. And of course, self-teaching yourself. No one is going to teach you everything. Some things you'll have to learn them yourselves. You need to train. There's not a recipe. It's not like you go somewhere and you finish being, you end up being an expert. You need to study yourself. There are people who can help you with master's degree, training, courses, etc. But you need to supplement that. And then certifications, this is sort of a taboo, but we need to speak about this. Some people ask, is it necessary? Do I need this certificate? I'm not going to give any names. Well, no. I prefer that the company hiring you should give you the certifications. If you join a company with a junior profile and they suggest a career path for you, they can give you the certifications, and that's a very good thing because they're interested in you having that certificate so they can join some profiles. So it's a win-win situation. The person wins because he or she is receiving certifications. The company is happy also because they have good people in the company. They're winning projects and they charge money for those projects. I know many cases of people who finish the degree at university. They already have certifications in cybersecurity, and it's okay. It's something else. But it's not pivotal so that a company offers you your first opportunity. Is it going to help you? Yes. But you're going to get to the same place. But that's my opinion. You can argue with that. Everything I say, it's arguable. So, are they useful? Yes, they're useful, but I prefer that the company gives them to you when you're young and when you're being offered the first opportunity. There's supplements, of course. They're specialized. And which ones are interesting for me? There are many other. But personally, I prefer certifications that assess your actual ability, whether you've acquired the ability. How do you do that? With a test? If I give you an examination to check that you have the skills. It's weird. You have some knowledge, perhaps you've read a test in the internet, and which was quite similar. Perhaps it's more interesting that we are assessed by giving us some time and a series of exercises, and I'm being assessed like that I have the skills to solve these problems. There are these types of certifications. So now let's move on to chapter 3, my first job. First of all, I'd like to tell you about my story. I had a series of first jobs. The first one, I show it with a sandwich. I used to sell sandwiches. I prepared them and sold them. I did that when I was 17. In high school, I had to stay 1 year with 2 subjects before I could go to college. And I used that time to get my driving license and to work. I started to work. I need to request my father's permission because I was a minor. He gave it to me, and I worked over the weekends like many other people. Now, at the end, you start to value lots of things when you do that. And when you achieve all the things you dream of, you value them more because you've gone through this experience. It was not just the sandwiches. That was in order to buy a car, a little car. Please do not think there was a wonderful car. Second, this looks like a tablet. I marketed them in a shop which is very famous in order to get myself a laptop. I wanted a laptop, and I didn't want to ask my father for the money. And in another famous shop, I sold many products. I was wearing a red jacket. Are you familiar with that? There are some people wearing a red jacket, which is really flashy and it doesn't look very nice, but I wore that jacket and it helped me to value effort. My goal back then was this, so I needed to work. These were my first jobs, and I'm proud of it. The one I liked more was the sandwiches, because I didn't have time to get bored, and I learned that being still like this, watching time going by, was not a good thing for me. I didn't like it. But doing sandwiches all the time, well, I liked that. I had scholarships and grants at University Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid. Then I joined an IT company in the south of Madrid, Leganés. I worked there for a month. I didn't stay long because there were personal issues and I saw that I was not learning very much, so I quit. And then I arrived to I-64. I have a friend called Juan Antonio Calles. He sent my CV for me. I didn't know about that. And they called me. And they told me, you need to come here for an interview. So I went there. This was 2009. I did the interview and they said, you need to prepare a topic to present it. And that would be your second interview. I had never presented any topic. Just my project at the end of my university degree. We weren't taught to give presentations. So I gave the presentation the way I could and I landed the job. I joined in 2009, stayed there until 2013, until Telefónica bought the company. So those 4 years, from a professional point of view, perhaps they were the best years in my life. Why? Because I decided to join an SME with the risk that entails. Because when you're in university, you're like crazy about big companies, and I chose a different path. I don't regret it, of course. I would take that decision again. I decided to join an SME. I could have taken the regular path, which is joining a big IT company, a consultant company, which is okay. It's not a bad way to start, but I joined an SME instead, and my Friends from university used to ask me, what do you work? And I said, Informática 64. Oh, okay. Chema Alonso was not known back then. The company was not known. It was widely known in cybersecurity industry, but people didn't know about it. And a woman once asked me, what company do you work for? And I would say Informática 64. I was very proud of it because I learned a lot there. And she said, I didn't ask you in which street, because the name of the company sounds like when you give an address in Spanish. A year later, she knew about Informática 64 because it was bought by Telefónica. So that stuck with me. It was a really strong thing. It was a joke. And I said, okay, everybody says the same thing. No one knows about this company, but I was very happy there. I didn't care about the number of hours we would work. We learned a lot. We learned from each other. It was like a family. I've put it here. And I was really surprised that a company being like a family. And recently, I've become familiar with a similar case. It's a family that have something very similar, and it's very beautiful because knowledge flows. No one keeps what they know for themselves, and that happens in some other companies. I don't tell you about what I know because you might get ahead of myself. In an SME, it doesn't happen, or it shouldn't happen, because the survival of the SME is beyond that. How do we get our first job? It's about skills. And when I say skills, I don't mean that this should be understood as, well, I have a master's degree, university degrees. It's not that just that. How many of you have a degree? Probably many of you. Many of you have a degree or a vocational training degree. Everybody has something. So if you go to human resources, and this is a real situation, if you go to human resources, they're going to tell you, I received CVs which are copy-paste. IT engineer, IT engineer, IT engineer. How do I make the difference? How do I know which one is the right one for my company? It's very complicated. And skills are important for that. The skills you need to prove, which are not proven through a degree. For example, I have something I like Flow Project, and I create a blog. In my CV, I can add that I have a blog, and probably the people reading my CV will check my blog. You may have technical things there or things that you like. If you create code on your own, if you create apps, you can have a GitHub, a public GitHub. You can put it in your CV because that's added value for you. Because yes, this guy has a degree or a vocational training degree, but he has a GitHub and I can see what he actually does. If you go to a conference and you show that you're going to those conferences, that you want to learn, that's an attitude. Of course, this effort needs to be shown somehow, and that's very complicated. So with this type of things, when you're telling human resources people, it's easier for you to have an advantage in that process. This is not mathematics, but it can be done. You need to show your passion. When you show how passionate you are about what you do, and the person in front of you sees that, they know that your profile is potentially interesting. Why? Because your attitude, your skills, well, you have it with the learning you've received, with the things you've learned. And even if you don't have it, the company can provide it for you somehow, otherwise you will leave the company. But they will give it to you, especially at the beginning. But the attitude, that's something the companies should require, and they are requiring it. Because that's not something you learn, that's something you have. You have it in you. So this is the discussion. The attitude, you have it in you, and you have to show it. And the skills, that's something the training, that's something the companies can't provide you with. This is something you could argue. And there's also something else you need to show, which is being humble. In cybersecurity and other industries, I think any industry in life, you need to be humble. In other industries and in ours, there may be big egos, which is normal, but being humble is a value that you can convey, and it's always positive if it's real. I'll tell you a story, a personal story. This is an extraordinary award for my degree, IT engineer, first academic record in 2009 in my university. I hope this story is useful for you. Back then, I was 23, 24 years old, or 22, 23 rather. There was a ceremony at the university, the people receiving the awards were there, it was all very nice. What does your ego do with that when you're 22? Well, it goes up, it grows. And there you say, I'm the best of my class, that's great. If I'm the best in my class, well, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. Next day, I went back to my to work, Informatica 64. And I sat there and I took a look at my colleagues. This guy doesn't have a university degree, this one doesn't have a university degree or a vocational training degree, and they were far better than I was. Back then, my ego decreased. Why? Because at the end of the day, you need to have a clear idea of where you are, who you are. You're not going to be the best ones, you have a talent, you all have talent, and you need to focus that talent. You need to understand and have a clear idea about how things are so that you keep yourself grounded. At some point, I confess that I thought I'm the best, but no, it was false. It was an award, a recognition I received, great, but that doesn't mean you're the best. Chapter 4. Those crazy years. We're getting close to the end. Cybersecurity is growing. The worst thing in this life is working in something that you don't like. There was a colleague of mine, Fran Ramirez, a colleague of mine in Telefónica. I like this sentence because it's a very simple sentence, but it's real. We spend a high percentage of our life working. If we had the opportunity or the possibility, since we're young, of working in something we like, something we're passionate about, that's extraordinary. It's a privilege. Because there are many people who work every day in many things that they don't like, and they have to do it. They have people to feed, people to sustain, to maintain. They have responsibilities. We have a very interesting opportunity, which is the privilege of being able to do what we like. And I've had the situation twice, because right now we've finished theoretically a crisis, but when I started, we were in the middle of the huge crisis. I had the opportunity of starting to work in something I was passionate about at a time in which people were jobless. So my privilege was double. And then you need to work in your interests, in the things you're curious about. There's a pool of teaching tools where we propose a code in order to start to learn about cybersecurity. If you're not familiar with this, I would recommend you to access it. It's become some sort of a wiki. There are some things included there. Sometimes we go there to remember things. There was a community back then. Now it's a blog with repositories. And I would like to send a message for those of you, the youngest ones here, and that is that in Spain there's a lot of talent There are a lot of people outside of Spain working in big companies. You have curiosity, you're thrilled about it, but you need to work on that. There's passion and there's attitude. And I'll give you these examples. This association, they move a lot. They're very young people. They're sort of a quarry for talent. And they're constantly proving that movement, that curiosity for learning. And they're not requesting anything in exchange. They want to learn, they want to absorb. That's all they think about. We also have this blog. That's just another example. People that got together, they learned from each other, and they grew. They've grown so much. Last year in RotatCon, they had a whole track for them. They had speakers and everything. And then Alisal, same thing. Very young people, still in high school. They're trained to take part in cybersecurity competitions. And it's a great human quarry. There's a lot of attitude there. And before finishing, I would like to mention entrepreneurship. We're a bit behind schedule. Entrepreneurship in this country is something that should be improved. It's true that legislation itself is not the best, so that anyone can easily start a company. We should work on that. But the country is made with people that take a risk. Who do you think said this? You're going to be surprised. We're in Malaga, right? Antonio Banderas. He was talking to the founder of Uber, who spoke about all the times he had failed, the debts he had until he succeeded. And Antonio Banderas said that it was a pity that in the US entrepreneurship was supported and 75% of university students wanted to be entrepreneurs, being their own bosses, implementing their own ideas. And in Spain, it was the other way around. It was very hard. 75% of students wanted a stable job, being a civil servant, which is okay if it's your vocation. Two different ends of the spectrum. So, entrepreneurship, you could tell me, you're not an entrepreneur. I was tempted in the past. And I sort of did something. I created a brand for training. It is true that it goes in parallel with my activity, but at the end of the day, it's some sort of entrepreneurship because you need to create the brand, you have to promote it, sell it, marketing. Our present, our future. We have talent, infinite sources in order to develop it. Technology is infinite. We have every possibility at our hand. This is a bit poetic. Today, tomorrow's jobs are created. Are we in a bubble? Many people ask about this. Is cybersecurity a bubble? And many people in this say, yes, it's a bubble, but no, it's not. And we have to insist that it's not. Right now, there's a digital transformation of companies going on, not just companies, but society itself. Society is digitally transforming itself. There's a danger of digital gap. If you stay behind, you're going to have serious problems. There are countries in Latin America with 50% of digital gap. We're not in that situation, and we understand that cybersecurity is applied to every new paradigm which is born in the new digital world. As a society and as a company, that's why we require more and more profiles with this type of skills. Just to give you a few examples, the Internet of Things, yes, is going to offer a lot of development for society, but in order to be safe with this paradigm, we need cybersecurity. IA, big data and industry 4.0. Perhaps in Europe is more evolved, but in Spain it's also a reality. This creates a need for profiles, and there are more things. There are many possibilities with regards to jobs. You need to focus on what you want, what you need. So if you have any question, you can ask it, or maybe outside if you want.
Sí. ¿No? ¿Sí? ¿Sí?
¿Puedo hablar? Sí. Perdón. Perdón, es que he llegado justo al final. Yo, por experiencia propia mía.
Based on my experience, what do you think about your hobby becoming a job? After many years, when your hobby is your job and you finish your job in the evening, what do you do? When you're young, you like it so much that it's not a problem. But then when you have family, you have established a difference, but you're going to have that situation in any job. How do you establish a difference, or if passion wears off? Sometimes, if you do the same thing all the time, if you do pen testing for 5 years, at some point you say, it's not that cool anymore. But perhaps not. There are people who have done the same thing for 10 years and they haven't lost the passion because they're constantly learning. But with time, you can lose your passion. But in our industry, we're lucky enough we can rotate, we can do similar things, but that are different. I can do pen testing and then a similar thing, or I can manage projects. So you can change roles within the same field because you need to evolve. You cannot do pen testing for 40 years. It wouldn't make sense because people that comes after you, they're going to be better than you, they have more information, they're faster, whatever. Any other question? Well, thank you very much. I'll leave you with Sergio.